Did you know that Rogue One may have fixed or completely ruined the original Stormtrooper helmet? My name is Mike, I'm the Weird Pigeon of Weird Pigeon Productions, and today we're going to be talking about the history of the Stormtrooper helmet and how Disney has changed the helmet for better or for worse. To help explain some of the changes to the helmet, I'm actually going to be using my Black Series Rogue One Stormtrooper helmet, which upon researching this video, I've realized is way more screen accurate than I originally thought. During the pre-production process of Rogue One, the prop makers and the costume designers actually went to the Lucasfilm archives and looked at the original costumes and props used for the original trilogy. Rogue One is set literally minutes before A New Hope, so they decided to pull out the original A New Hope helmets and take a look at them before they created all new ones. What they realized was that these helmets were in really bad shape, and also all of them were not symmetrical. They were warped and deformed in weird ways. So the costume designers decided it would be a great idea to go ahead and recreate the original A New Hope Stormtrooper helmet from the ground up. And if you didn't already know, there are actually some pretty drastic differences between the Stormtrooper helmets in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. If you want to know more about that, I've actually already made a video discussing the history of the original trilogy Stormtrooper helmet and the many changes it went through throughout the 3 movies. And I will be discussing some of these changes later on in the video, so you're not totally in the dark if you don't watch that one. When redesigning the new Rogue One helmet, the first thing they decided to do was make it perfectly symmetrical. Technology has changed quite a bit in the over 40 years since A New Hope. And instead of just using a handmade mold out of clay like what they used to create the original Stormtrooper helmets from, they were able to perfectly design these helmets to be symmetrical with computers. On top of this, the actual process they used to make these helmets is completely different from what they used in the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, for A New Hope, they used a process called vacuum forming. Essentially, vacuum forming is where you take a big sheet of plastic, you place it over a mold, you suck out all the air, and then you're left with your shape and design. But what they use for the Rogue One helmets is called injection molding. You have a mold, you inject the plastic into it, it forms around that mold, and it actually allows for greater detail in your finished product and a thicker plastic, allowing the design to be more durable because, of course, it's thicker. It's also suspected that the actual material they used was completely different. In the original trilogy, they used ABS plastic for the majority of the helmets. No one knows for sure which exact plastic it was that they used, but it's suspected that it was a type of polyurethane plastic. This plastic actually has a little more give into it. It can bend quite a bit without breaking, allowing the actor in the costume more flexibility, which is perfect for big battle scenes and stunts. But that's enough about how it was made. Let's talk about some of the cosmetic differences. The number one most notable difference is actually the frown here on the front. In A New Hope, there was actually 2 separate Stormtrooper helmets made. There were 50 stunt helmets and 6 hero helmets, and there was a slight difference in the 2. The frown on the hero helmets is really small, and the frown on the stunt helmets is pretty large. Sometimes the frown on the stunt helmets even goes all the way to the very corner of the helmet, whereas the frown on the hero helmets usually stops right about in here. For Rogue One, they actually decided to mesh these 2 designs together and came at a compromise by having the frown end right about here. Also, underneath the gray teeth, they put a black mesh material that allowed the wearer to breathe through the mask, which I'm sure made it a lot easier to see, especially if you're breathing really hard. You really don't want to fog up the lenses during some of the scenes. As Luke says in New Hope, it's already hard enough to see all of these things. Another really big difference is the fact that the brows on the helmet are all uniform, and they're a little bit lower and closer to the eyes. In A New Hope, a lot of the brows were actually bowed upwards or just really wonky and warped. But now, thanks to modern technology, they're all perfectly straight. Now, my favorite detail that they changed about the helmets is actually the little details that you see on the helmets themselves, like the blue stripes here on the respirator, the design here on the cheek, and the design up here on the temple are all actually engraved into the Rogue One helmets. For A New Hope, these details were all hand-painted on top of the helmet. They weren't embedded in the helmet itself. And for the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, they were actually placed on the helmets with vinyl stickers. To me, by engraving the details into the helmet and then painting them, it just adds to the realism and complexity of the design for the Stormtrooper helmets. Now, probably the biggest difference in the overall shape of the helmet, besides the fact that they're now perfectly symmetrical, is the fact that this whole chin part, along with the ends of the respirators, is a separate piece, and it's actually a little smaller than what we see used in A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, and Empire Strikes Back. And the final major change with these helmets is the fact that they're no longer held together by flathead screws. In the original trilogy, all of these helmets were actually held together by 2 flathead screws screwed into each earpiece. On the Rogue One helmets, those screws have now been replaced with these little white indented buttons. So that's how Disney changed the helmet for Rogue One, but what about for Solo? Well, what we actually see in Solo is just the Rogue One helmets and armor reused, which again, it makes sense to use a helmet that's reminiscent of A New Hope in Solo, because it does take place before Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where we see the helmets different. The biggest difference between the A New Hope helmet, the Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi helmet is that for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, the frowns are actually painted completely black. And the Return of the Jedi helmet is actually a little bit slimmer and taller than the other 2 movies. But you may be thinking to yourself now, what about The Mandalorian? Since The Mandalorian takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, after we see these helmets changed, it would just make sense to have helmets with black frowns instead of the gray ones that we see in A New Hope. Unfortunately, they actually again reuse the paint scheme and design for the Rogue One helmets. Now in The Mandalorian, we see a defeated Empire, a remnant of what the Empire used to be. And it would make sense if the Stormtroopers had to use older surplus, like in A New Hope style helmet. But to me, it is really odd that we never see a single black frown in either of the 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. To me, it would make perfect sense to show Stormtroopers fighting alongside each other wearing A New Hope helmets, Empire Strikes Back helmets, and Return of the Jedi helmets. It would further add to the desperation of the Empire. They're no longer as uniform and perfect as they used to be. They're dirty, they're having to scrap together different pieces of helmets and armor in order to arm their troops. I do really like the design for the Remnant Stormtroopers, just how dirty and almost yellowed the perfect white armor has become. It really does look like the Empire has seen better days. But it would make even more sense if they included the other movies' helmets as well. However, for those of you who really like the Return of the Jedi style helmet and the Empire Strikes Back style helmet, which as I saw in my last video, there is quite a few of you, there may be hope that we will finally get a Disney version of these helmets in the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, but since they haven't done it in the last 2, I wouldn't really count on it. One interesting thing that Disney did do for The Mandalorian is that they did include members of the 501st Costume Club in the big standoff in the last 2 episodes of The Mandalorian Season 1. And here we do actually see Rogue One style helmets and armor and A New Hope style stunt helmets and armor. And finally, for Obi-Wan Kenobi, we see again the Rogue One Stormtrooper helmet being used for all the Stormtroopers in the show. And unlike The Mandalorian, this does make perfect sense because again, it takes place about 9 years before A New Hope, so that design checks out. So as you can probably tell, the design for the Stormtrooper helmet for Rogue One has really become the new Disney Stormtrooper helmet. It's what they use now for all of their movies and shows, and it's kind of like a Stormtrooper helmet 2.0. But what about Andor, the new upcoming Disney Plus TV show? We'll most likely see, again, the Rogue One Stormtrooper helmet used, because it would just make sense. So what do you think? Do you think Disney has perfected these helmets, made them better than they ever were before, or have they ruined them? Although personally, I prefer these newer upgraded Disney versions of the A New Hope helmet, I've got to say I do kind of miss the wonkiness and charm of the original helmets. In the imperfections, you can see all the love and care that went into painstakingly creating these helmets from hand, applying every sticker, painting every detail. It is a shame that it seems in this new Disney era, the original style of the helmet is now lost to time. So what do you think? I would love to hear from you. The last video, y'all commented so much, and I really appreciate it. I loved reading through what you guys had to say, some of your in-universe theories on why the helmet changed from movie to movie. So please be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if you want to see more videos just like this one, please subscribe. It would mean a whole lot to me. Just like the previous video, all the articles, pictures, and videos that I used and referenced in this video are going to be in the description down below. So if you want to learn more about the newer Disney helmets, you can check those out. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.